Just ahead of US presidential polls, Donald Trump's new indictment has rocked his newly reshaped race against Kamala Harris. Special counsel Jack Smith defiantly re-injected the question of Donald Trump's bid to steal the 2020 election into the intensifying endgame of this year's White House race. By trying to rescue his case after his initial indictment was gutted by the Supreme Court's immunity ruling, Smith has signaled that he is determined to bring the former president to justice, even though there will be no trial before election day. The revised indictment lays out the same 4 charges it brought against the Republican former president last year, focusing on Donald Trump's role as a political candidate seeking re-election rather than as the president at the time. We bring you more.
With just 3 months to go for the presidential election, Special Counsel Jack Smith has resurrected the 2020 election interference case against Donald Trump. Smith's initial indictment was gutted by the Supreme Court's immunity ruling. So while the new indictment doesn't substantially change the criminal case against Trump, it protects it in the wake of the immunity ruling, saying that Trump and other presidents have immunity for official acts, but not for unofficial ones. The central charge remains the same, that Trump attempted to subvert the 2020 presidential election and overturn his loss to Joe Biden. But the new indictment does away with the interactions that Trump had with the Department of Justice and zeroes in on his role as a political candidate. The document retains the same 4 criminal charges against Trump that were originally filed last summer. But portions of the new indictment are rewritten to emphasize that Trump was not acting in his official capacity during his efforts to overturn the election. One new line in the indictment mentions that the defendant had no official responsibilities related to the certification proceeding, but he did have a personal interest as a candidate in being named the winner of the election. The new document removes the mention of Jeffrey Clark, a former Justice Department official who aided Trump in his attempt to try and overturn the election. Clark was the only government official who was listed as an unnamed co-conspirator in the original indictment. In its July ruling, the Supreme Court wrote that Trump was absolutely immune from prosecution over his discussion with Justice Department officials. So that explains Clark's removal from the new indictment. The Supreme Court also suggested that a president could be criminally immune in connection to acts between him and the vice president. So the latest indictment reframes Trump's interactions with Mike Pence, emphasizing that he was Trump's running mate instead of the vice president. Jack Smith's new case still faces huge obstacles. The presiding district court judge, Tanya Chutkan, will have to interpret the court's ruling to decide which evidence remains admissible. And you can be assured that Trump's legal team will fight Smith at every turn and use every appellate option available. The former president's legal and campaign team may accuse Smith of infringing Justice Department custom to avoid proceedings against key political figures so close to an election. In any event, it appears unlikely that the case will reach court before the November 5 election. The reworked indictment led to a furious Trump going on a posting spree on Truth Social. He called it a resurrection of a dead witch hunt, an act of desperation, persecution of a political opponent. He also called Jack Smith deranged and demanded that the case be dismissed immediately.
I think it's clearly an effort to try to do more election interference from Jack Smith. He should be ashamed of himself, and it's one of the reasons why we have to win, because he should not be anywhere near power.
Trump has denied accusations that he pressured officials to reverse the results, knowingly spread lies about election fraud, and sought to exploit a riot at the US Capitol to delay the certification of Biden's victory. But the reworked case is one of 4 indictments against Trump. He is the first US president to face and be convicted of criminal charges. In May, Trump was found guilty of 34 charges of falsifying business records in New York. But even that verdict has been thrown into potential legal limbo as a result of the Supreme Court decision granting broad immunity to presidential actions.
Consider the power he will have, especially after the United States Supreme Court just ruled that he would be immune from criminal prosecution. Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails.
The return of Trump's legal problems presents a new opportunity for Democratic nominee Kamala Harris. So far, she has been focusing on presenting herself as a candidate of generational change compared to Trump. Now, with another indictment, she can drive home the point of moving past the chaos of the Trump years into a more optimistic future. On the other hand, Trump has used his criminal problems to revive his campaign, especially during the Republican primary contest. His new indictment comes almost exactly a year after he showed up to be booked at an Atlanta jail and his mugshot turned into a symbol of defiance. Trump has lately struggled to stop Kamala Harris's momentum, and the latest indictment could be just what he needs to portray himself as a victim of election interference by the Biden-Harris administration.